Today is a deep dive, the fireside kind of chat just between me and Sean. We're talking about the Code Audit, what it is, why it matters, and why we think every piece of AI-built software, especially vibe-coded, should go through one before it goes anywhere near real users.
So welcome back to CTRL-ALT-DEV, the show for software founders, digital leaders and curious business owners who want to make sense of AI in business without the hype. I'm Sean Sale.
And I'm Paul Rhodes, and today I want to talk about something we're both seeing more and more of. People are building real working software with AI tools like Replit, Lovable, and other AI-assisted development platforms.
And we've alluded to this before. They're creating applications faster than ever before, and they've hit a wall.
Yeah, because there's a massive difference actually between a prototype and a production-ready piece of software.
Most people building this way have no idea, as I said, that the gap even exists because the software looks finished. It has user dashboards, sales information, reports and workflows. It's a fully working GUI to these users, but to the average person, of course, it feels complete and they're super excited.
Yeah, but looking complete and being ready for real world use are two very different things, aren't they?
They are. And today we're going to be talking all about the code audit, what actually is a code audit, why it matters, and why we think every piece of vibe-coded software should go through one before it goes anywhere near real users and gets production ready on MWS or AWS.
And if you're new here, before we dive into the real meaty topic, we run 4 different formats to this show. We do the deep dive, which is what we're doing today. It's just the two of us talking about one specific topic, and we properly attempt to unpack it. Sometimes it's tightly structured around a listener question, which you can submit at podcast@ggapps.co.uk, or we do things like a news roundup, and sometimes a looser fireside chat. Either way, it's Paul and Sean on a topic of the day. We also do guest interviews. So we bring someone in doing the actual work in the field, not just talking about it, but giving them a platform to tell their story, their journey, what they see is happening right now, and then also the future. We ask the questions the polished case studies never ask. We also do show and tell. So we recently did the meal planner. So we open the laptop and we kind of talk through a very, very specific use case or tool that we're using in our own businesses. Real workflows, real results, and our own internal blueprints given away. And then finally, and the reason we're telling you about all of our formats is we're just about to launch a brand new one, which is a panel review, where we get several guests around the table and we pull apart a big topic in software and AI from every single angle. The other thing about our podcast is we don't run ads ever. So if today's episode enlightens you, it gives you one simple nugget. All that we ask is that you share the show. So give it to somebody you think will be of value and get some value from it. That's the only ask we have. So yeah, Sean, let's get into today's topic.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Right. So the interesting thing that none of this started as a code audit service. It started with a workshop that we were asked to build. So we ran a build an app in 2.5 hours sessions for multiple organizations, and it showed people they could go from idea to prototype in a single afternoon. It was incredibly successful, but what I decided to do as the kind of grounding of everything was it was based on similar conversations with Peter Lowe we had about the PRD, and then also pre-AI, Kurt and myself attended a West Midlands developer conference. I think it was just before, it was the same year as OpenAI released Chat. And what I found really interesting was there was a summary of the whole day. And what they did is they had one slide that really stuck out from me. And it said, what is great software? And they listed 11 pillars. And to give you an example, it was like, it's documented, it's tested, it's accessible. So it was more than just the code. And I took away, I've still got a piece of paper today in my notebook of what they listed. And I'd been in the industry at that point for 20 years. And even I was like, I forget, genuinely forget about accessibility or about the level of documentation and things like this. So I took that as a challenge to my team when we went back and did our developer debriefs, which we do after every single conference to kind of give the benefit to every other developer. I really went deep into this thing of, if we're going to make the best quality software, I believe that these 11 pillars are the base like principles of everything we should be doing. And then enter the world of AI in a small team, trying to achieve all these 11 pillars in the traditional billable hour. People don't want to pay for quality. Traditionally, they want the speed and the functionality. Now you can have all three. You can have...
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because historically, you and I know that you spend, or some of our customers have spent thousands of pounds with us explaining. We've had to kind of prototype it, almost go back and forth and say, is this exactly what you require for the software that we need to build? And as you rightly say, that kind of whole piece of the jigsaw has now got infinitely smaller, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think the role of any good software development company or department is to build quality, maintainable code that's secure, But the driver in a commercial sense for most departments and businesses is, I want functionality. I want functionality. It's the classic debate that is always going on is, upgrades provide long-term benefits, but actually they're the first thing to get delayed. If you're going to spend £1,000 on something that upgrades your software, but you don't see any tangible benefit because it's an upgrade to a framework, it's what it then allows you to do, versus I want £1,000 of a brand new feature. The tendency has always been to go for the new feature because they just want more and more and more. But we all know the more code that you add, the more complex and more spaghetti it gets, the less maintainable it becomes. So it's this constant, I see it now as like a battle between writing the best, most secure documented code and pure functionality of the outcome. That's the outcome, isn't it? The people don't want the software. They don't want a computer. They want the outcome it's going to give them. And anything that doesn't directly go towards that outcome is often seen as a necessary evil. And so, yes, of course, companies need to spend in upgrades and stuff. And I know you've got your own heartache like last week with upgrades and everything else. So it's that. Sorry, Sean, your facial expression suggests a whole of a podcast episode there. But yeah, that was the origin for me. Was just we went to a conference, and I'm like, I hear you, I get it, I truly believe in what you're saying, and then I bring the commercial reality in and all my own excuses of, well, who's paying for that? Who's paying for testing, unit testing? If you go to a client pre-AI and you're correctly saying, well, we're going to charge you for testing, but that's twice the amount of man hours, then at the end of the day, or people hours, sorry, but at the end of the day, that's an increased cost, isn't it? So you either absorb the cost into your own margins and do it because it's the right thing to do, which is what often happens, or you obviously have to charge inflated prices, and some price sensitive customers don't see the value and they're like, no, that's fine, but you're going to get more bugs. Yeah, but you're going to fix them for free. It's like, it's a catch-22, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I don't know if I explained that, Sean, but that's where it all came from. One developer conference. It's like kind of made it really accessible to me.
We had the same. I did a presentation, and I suppose in a way very similar to you. I showed in the presentation just how easy it was to build an application with Lovable in about 10 minutes, and it absolutely wowed the audience. But I kind of threw myself under the bonnet, because then I had people saying, well, why do we need software developers?
And that is a great question to ask, isn't it? That is a really good question to ask.
Absolutely.
So how would you answer it?
and we're going back into this conversation now, isn't it? The fact is, you and I have had 20 plus years of experience of building applications. We know, as you say, those core 11, was it 11 pillars you were saying?
Yeah.
In fact, we start talking about those 11 pillars because I think that brings us in nicely.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'll give you a flavour of them. So, like the ones that I know, I literally pulled up my notes. So, forgive me, I am going to read from a screen. But we've built our little agent thing. So, this is a sample of them. So, if you think about, so you're going to write any piece of software, and traditionally you're going to have users. I mean, you can have software that doesn't necessarily have users, but you're going to have users.
We might have one single user, yeah.
So the things you need to be thinking about, and I think one thing that vibe coders that we work with, and they wouldn't mind me saying this at all, what their strengths are. Okay, I think this is a good bit of segue context. So what their strengths are is passion, clarity of thought in terms of what they actually want, and their ability to create code with natural language. They don't need to know anything about code. The code gets generated.
And I think and add as well, they've got the knowledge of their business, haven't they?
Yeah, they know the market, they know the price points. So yeah, exactly. So they're building. What we observe is these vibe coders are not like what people might think. They're like the people we work with are multi-million-pound business owners. They're the CEO, the founder, and they're telling us repeatedly they're spending 6 hours a day working on their vibe coded solutions. They're spending hundreds to thousands of pounds per month with tools like Replit and Lovable. And what they're doing is that ultimately their motivation is to replace some of their SaaS costs. So they're currently looking at it as a SaaS OPEX expenditure. They might spend £60,000 on just one piece of software, and they know they're only using 20% of it. They look at the piece.
I also think as well, though, I think it's not just the SaaS software.
It's not the sole thing.
Because not mentioning names, but I went to see a client that I was very shocked. £25 million turnover a year, and using spreadsheets, and has been using it very successfully.
That's most multi-million-pound businesses, though, isn't it? It's like everyone thinks big means best, and they're some of the most archaic, But it's the classic thing of, I can afford to employ a person to do that role.
Correct.
But yeah, I was just coming around to the fact that, so you've got like the person, like you say, is a shrewd business owner, they know what they're doing. So now they've got the capability that they've never had in the past, where they can directly interface with a computer, like having a programmer on their shoulder, and start to create. And what they see being created is functionality. And that just lights up their world. And they, for the first time, think, well, I can actually replace 2 or 3 software subscriptions with exactly what I want. So it's almost like this thing of a trade-off between, I'm paying for this and I use 20% of it. I can build this and use 100% of it, and it's lower operating costs and all that sort of thing. So that's where they come from. What these vibe coders, and again, it's not a slur, lack is the 20 years that you talked about. They don't understand the software development life cycle. They don't know about like version control. They don't know about staging environments. They don't know about, and it's not their fault, but it's the classic problem of you don't know what you don't know. So therefore, when you're in front of AI, you only talk about functionality. So they don't know about necessarily what you do in the planning phase of a project. They don't know what they know.
Well, do you remember all the data modeling SSADM techniques we had to learn? All those.
Yeah. I mean, it's mad. Like UML and stuff, and just designing a database schema before you even get to the database on, like doing it on paper. And I think, so if you think about the classic, you plan a project, you build a project, you deploy a project, that's a big part. And these tools make it super easy. And then obviously you maintain. Nobody is giving any thought to the fact that that car is just about to roll out of the forecourt, like you've just bought it and it's brand new and shiny, but there's no thought to servicing, MOTs, secure, like you get a flat tire, what do you do? And because they don't have any secure test environments, what's happening a lot is that the owner is the only person in the business responsible for this vibe coded software. They haven't delegated it to anyone else. AI is going through every night and fixing its own bugs. But what happens if it fixes the bug at 3 a.m. and now nobody can log in the next day? And you've literally got, we're talking about, this is, in terms of real fears, I've got a client who that is their biggest number one fear, is that it's middle of the night. They don't even know about it. The first they know about it is they get a phone call, early hours, 100 workers on site can't log in. And he's replaced his entire infrastructure. Those are the kind of doomsday scenarios they have.
The problem is, the vibe coders, they're seeing the visible 20% of the application, the invisible 80%.
Yeah.
As Paul has alluded to very well, that's where all the risk is sitting, isn't it? The security vulnerabilities, things like that. Yeah.
So to go back to the, we've built these as agents as part of the code audit, and there's lots of different parameters and levels to it. But if I'm just reading my list, so security, a massive one. day zero vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are released all day, every day. People are trying to hack software left, right, and center. So you've got security, the performance of it. So bottlenecks, we know about caching, we know about N+1 queries, resource usage. Performance in itself is you can have a product that does the 20% of work, works brilliantly in Replit of 50 users or 50 records. But when you go to your actual production data and you're pulling across and migrating all your previous SaaS data and you're talking about millions of records, it doesn't. Can it function? 100%. But it's another domain of expertise. Code quality is huge. It's like, that's the maintainability, isn't it? That's the structures, the patterns that this entity, this AI that you haven't even got any concept of, has started to write the underlying stuff. Like, I don't know how an engine in a car works, but I trust the engine of the car that I drive because it's come from a certain manufacturer with loads of standards and processes.
Loads of testing.
Your AI vibe coded software has no solid foundations whatsoever. It's like, it's the equivalent of pulling up to a car into a garage. The mechanic's never seen this car before and putting it up on the ramp and going, what have you done here with this engine? Why is it like this? Like, I'm going to service it for you, but it could be very costly. Documentation. So just the ability to document APIs that are built into it, all the readmes that you need, the documentation, inline commenting.
And just explain there, APIs, because we've got some listeners that will go, what on earth are you on about with APIs?
Yeah, so in an easy way to understand it, most vibe coders that I've worked with integrate their newly built software into something else. It might be their accounts package like Xero. It might integrate into their CRM. To do that secure connection is called an AI, application programming interface. So it's just a layer that enables you to send and receive data really between two different platforms or more. Yes, that's what an API is. It's the backbone of the modern internet. Most decent pieces of software will not have one API. They'll have like loads of connectivity across. And then now you're getting that usurped and replaced with MCPs, which is how you connect your software to a large language model. So again, in most vibe coded software, they'll be doing something where they want generative AI, like, as part of this, it creates an email. But instead of hard coding, what we used to do, which is, what do you want the text to say in the email? You'd use a prompt that would go off to like Gemini or chat. That's an MCP request. It can be an API request, but it's often MCP. So there's integrations, and they should all be documented. And what you should be doing as a proper developer is thinking, what's the minimum level of access I want to give? Because if you expose your entire system to the full API of certain systems, but you only need to do a read on one call, that's a massive vulnerability, isn't it? So it could theoretically go off without you understanding it and build out a complete way that another piece of system can write and delete data from your system. Now, it's not necessarily invoked, but it exists. Every piece of functionality that exists, it doesn't need to exist, is overkill, but it also becomes back to the security and the performance thing. Because if somebody gets hold of that endpoint, then they can start to utilize it and do some nasty stuff. So you got that. So testing. So testing takes many forms, but we're talking about automated testing. So when we write code, and AI is incredible at this, so it's not to be discouraged. When you write code, what you typically do is you do a thing called code coverage, and people typically aim for 80%. So 80% of all the functionality in the system has automated testing. And the reason that you have that is because when you then write feature B, feature A doesn't break. I think most people who've ever experienced bespoke software or built software have this thing of, why, when I've asked for it to change this, has something else in the system broken? And it's because that's the nature of software, but they didn't have tests in place to ensure that if you break something, it's alerted. And that's all testing is it alerts it. The world of AI today will find the breakage and then we'll actually fix the bug and get it green, as we call it, until it releases it. So there's like whole things there around deployment. You've got accessibility is overlooked. So the conference, again, I'm thinking of is, from a software usage, this, and you look at accessibility in WCAG, and you look at, the UX, the UI, there's a huge percentage of people who would actually class, when it comes to accessibility, as needing additional measures, and we don't build them as standard. Like, it would be quite rare to find a vibe coded solution. But what they were talking about on the conference was like, well, I wear glasses, so therefore technically when I think about a device like my phone, it doesn't occur to me, but yeah, I do change my accessibility settings. I change my font size. I change certain things. So if your interface doesn't work for that and you're employing loads of people to use your tool and you haven't given any thought to making it the best user experience, guess what happens to user adoption? It doesn't matter what the functionality. You could build the best solution for your business, but if it ain't accessible, it's gonna not be as rolled out. So user adoption is the end result of vibe coding. Yeah. If you can't get your employees to stop using the spreadsheet because it's more cumbersome for them to use your vibe coded solution that is the shiny new thing, then you're gonna have a massive problem. So accessibility, there's guidelines, there's standards you can look at. And the database, oh my God, a database is like, I mean, me and Sean are laughing now, but that is the beast within the whole arsenal, isn't it? It's like, schema health, like data integrity, migrations of data, constraints, things, putting in proper security rules like row level locking, all this sort of stuff. Partitioning is a huge part of what we do. So you've got a database, compliance. So like, more end-of-life runtimes, like frameworks, databases. So this is like every piece of software. I think this is where people might not necessarily understand what's actually happening under the hood. Is if you build like a really simple web application with vibe-coded software, it's basically running on a server, which might be virtualized, but it'll be running on like an operating system. So let's just say it's running on Linux, right? It'll be running on a version of Linux at that time. It's the car rolling out of the showroom. It'll be running a web server. So let's just say it's Nginx. That has a version. Runs a database, Postgres. That has a version. Yeah. It's built using React and Node. They both have versions. But then underneath all of that is these things called like modules. So you've got NPM as a manager for Node's modules. If you were using React, it has its own dependencies and packages. So software today, I don't think it's unrealistic to say the entire ecosystem is built on hundreds of thousands of packages, all versioned. So what we're talking about with compliance and end of life is any one of those packages can have what's called like a day zero vulnerability, which is we've just found this critical severity needs to be fixed now, because if you don't, you're susceptible. And so people think of it as just like the one piece of code that they're looking at functionality. You're talking about an entire ecosystem. You roll the car out of the garage, you pull off the little cloth that's covering it and you go, here's your new car. But the minute you roll it out on the road and it starts to gain traction, there's a better windscreen wiper that you could replace it with. So it's things you could upgrade and improve it with. But there's also that windscreen. It's a really bad analogy, but that windscreen wiper must be replaced because it's found to have a defect. It's found to do something wrong to the car if it's not fixed. So endoflife.date is a website worth going and checking out because it shows you everything in terms of all the versions when they become. And typically in the web world, software becomes end of life within 2 years. So there's an argument you could run your system with no patching, which I would never recommend for 2 years. But what I'm saying is after 2 years, the actual core frameworks that you're using, like React and that, stop getting security updates altogether. You've kind of ignored all the security updates anyway. So it's like, well, what does that matter? But from a compliance perspective, if you were doing pen testing on it, if you were doing any level of certification, you're going to hit issues because you're not running. The most important thing in software in 2026 is to keep it upgraded, maintained, and current. But I still know the NHS are running XP, so I say all that. It's like,
well, thinking about what I've just been listening there about what you were saying about when your clients and the biggest problem is it going down. I mean, remember that outage last year that took down Amazon Alexa, Ring, Prime, BT, EE, Canva, Slack? Was it? Yeah. Remember that? So there's a perfect example of what Paul's saying there. That there's just nothing you could do, was there? but you're you're utilizing that one piece of software behind the scenes. So that's a really good analogy.
Yeah. The next thing you can check, which is around security again, but is a different arm of security, is just pen testing. So this is where you actually set like I think they're called a red team, I've been discovering, but you set a red team against your software that you've written that you're really proud of, and you effectively try with automated and human testing to maliciously break it and find the exposures. And what typically happens with a pen test report is you get an audit that says critical to low. These are things we found, and it might be that there's a certain library you're using and it's out of date, so it needs to be upgraded. It might be that you're exposing certain headers, so you don't know any of this when you're a web coder because you haven't written any code. So then you're tasked with fixing it. And when we came up with the concept of the code audit for the Vibe Coder, we literally took the pen testing analogy. So a report, so the pen testing report lists critical to low. It gives you a count, and then it tells you in detail what the issue is and the remediation step. So when we do a code audit, it actually looks like a pen test report. So it goes through all these different agents, and it comes back and says, I mean, the one we did recently, 99 critical issues. Anybody can become an admin. So they register to the application, and within the account settings, anybody can become an admin, which is like a God setting on the system, which is just horrendous. The other thing was 80% of the application, even though there's authentication, wasn't behind any authentication layer. So again, you got to think about sophisticated, not even sophisticated really, but hackers have tools and means and AI to scan websites, to find endpoints, to do all this sort of stuff. 80% of his application that he thought was secure because you go compliantly at the front end through a login could all be accessed. All his data was readable. And then the final couple of things is almost to do with compliance of the spec. So the other thing that people, and we see this in the workshop a lot, and I like doing this bit because it's a bit of a aha moment, is we get people to build like a PRD.
Yeah.
And then what they do is that we go through like how you build a quick PRD, and then how you build a comprehensive one. And we do an A/B test on that. We get them to build application 1, and we show them how to build a PRD, and we get them to build application 2. And the difference is outstanding. But everybody trusts AI too much. So then we ask the question, okay, now you've built it, everyone happy? Does it look good? Yeah. Now ask it, what has it not developed in your PRD? And every person around the room got a response along the lines of, oh yeah, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't. And there was about 10 things that it had missed. And so we do a check to say, this was your functionality that you requested. How much of it is actually been developed, or how much is like a green, like a pass? Because if you say to it, here's a load of context, go and build it. AI today, we'll talk about Fable in another episode, but struggles with context window. There's multiple reasons why it hasn't done it, because it comes across as so subservient and like, obedient, but fundamentally, everyone takes it for granted that if you've asked it to do a task, it's completed it absolutely perfectly. And it's in some levels, you have to treat it like a very keen intern, and it's very willing to help. It can offer loads of support. It's definitely faster than doing it on your own. So human plus an AI is an amazing combination, but you can't delegate responsibility. You can't delegate trust. You're the overseer. You're like the commander, and you are responsible for what your troops do. I know that's a really bad analogy, but the PRD specification gaps are huge. They're absolutely huge. So you asked it to do functionality A to Z, and it will find out, well, it didn't do P, it didn't do D, and it's half-arsed S. Does that make any sense, Sean? So
it does. I mean, you're alluding to what I think you came up with a while ago, the iceberg analogy, and the prototype, or what AI is building, is the top part of the iceberg.
Yeah, it's the things you see. Yeah,
absolutely. Now you're on about the security, the database structure, the compliance, the testing, upgrading, recovery procedures, and unfortunately, that's the bit that sinks ships, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
That's
It
a great
is.
analogy. I don't think I came up with that, but I'm going to nick it.
The visible layer creates confidence. The innovation, absolutely. We're not against this, guys. We are absolutely for AI and the fantastic uses that people are using it for prototyping. All we're saying here is just to step back a little bit. What Paul and I are seeing now is that people are coming to us, assuming they can take these applications ready-made and to production level. And all we're kind of coming back to in this podcast right now is that stop. There is an audit process. And as Paul has alluded to, there's lots of these things deep below the iceberg that AI is not explaining. And in reality, right now, where the AI tools are right now, you just have to use software developer engineers like us to kind of give you that feedback. Isn't that true, Paul?
Yeah, and I think, and it's not the fault of AI. It's not the fault of Vibe Code. I think it's half the fault of the idiots on LinkedIn who pretend through their own Instagram followings that you can. I think the best way I explain vibe coding, and I know the people who've been on the journey and have confirmed this back to me, is what people, if you look at the old way of like how software used to work, right? So it used to be that you've got a picture in your head, Sean. So you're the prospect, right? So you've got a picture in your head, right, of what you want to get developed and the problem you want to solve in your business. And then you go either internally or externally. And what's actually happening is it's communication layer. So you have to communicate what you see in your mind's eye to an external party to say, this is what I want developed. So if you imagine two people sat around and one person's picturing a speedboat and the other person's picturing like a little sailboat on a lake, they're communicating the right kind of thing, but they've got very different images of how much you need to build and what you need to do to achieve the goal. So it was always delays. So if you came to me, we'd go, right, Sean, yeah, we could talk to you about your idea. What's your availability in 2 weeks? 2 weeks, we sit down, 45 minutes, and we start to ask you questions. And then from that, my understanding of really what you want is probably, even at best, 50%, right? Multiple meetings take place, and then ultimately doing the right thing, we do a tech spec and we do wireframes. And at that point, it's the first time visually you can say, I don't want it like that, I want it like this, right? So, but that's the prototyping phase. That's where we're starting to say, we've understood what you've said. We've applied our layer of expertise to it and all the project that we've done, and we believe this is the right thing. And we'll challenge some of your decisions as well, and we'll push back and say, don't do it like that, because if you do it this way, our expertise tells us that you're going to get these massive benefits in the future. So we're guiding you and telling you, great idea, but we'll execute it slightly differently. So if you look at that traditional format that people are still doing today, it requires brilliant communication and questioning, and it requires time, right? I challenge anybody to get a spec out fully understood without doing daily meetings within anything less than 2 to 4 weeks. I think it takes that amount of time for a decent system. What AI prototypes, vibe coding, are amazing at is that whole process can be done with just you and AI and a computer. So what's happening now is people are getting rid of the 4 weeks, and in a matter of hours, 4 hours, they're building out. That's exactly what I want. That's it. So I treat the vibe coder solution as the blueprint, the prototype for what you're trying to achieve. But what hasn't been asked is is that the right way to build it? Is that exactly how you should do it? The amount of vibe coded solutions I've sat in front of, again at a pub where someone's brought a laptop and we've gone through and gone, that's just confusing. Like, what are you actually, well, why don't you do this and change this and put this here and X, Y, and Z? And they go away and they simplify a lot. And I think what I observe with vibe coded is they don't get a clear definition of done. So they're forever working on it. They never launch it. And what they end up with is spaghetti code and a confused interface. And that's where the expertise comes in and says, right, I've understood your goal. I've understood what you're trying to do. We can help you get now to production, which is a whole different layer away. But effectively, you've built with like the equivalent of like a programmer on your shoulder. That communication thing has taken 4 hours instead of 4 weeks. you've got an amazing prototype. Now I can pick that up. And as a development company or internal team, we can say, right, we can actually build you that now in a week instead of 9 months. So we used to be 90 days to get to an MVP. If you do the prototype with the right attitude, and then you go external to get it scaled, and we're talking about scaling, we're not talking about just releasing it, scaling, that whole thing comes down from like 90 days to probably a couple of weeks.
And I think, when I was saying at the start of the podcast that there's that much code out there right now, I think this is going to, it's almost like there's a massive peak at the moment, and it'll start to come down, because I think I know that many of these vibe coders will realize that actually, going back to the iceberg analogy, there is so much depth to what they don't know.
We've got this is a really good analogy of it. So not analogy, it's story. I won't mention names, but guy came to me a year ago, and he was referred, and I had just a phone call with him. I had a phone call with everyone to start off with, and we were talking, and he had a full-time job, but he was really passionate about a subject outside of his core work, and he didn't know where to start. So I was like, okay, well, the starting point for anything is a minimal viable product. You need to prove your market. You need to test your market. You need to validate your hypotheses, and you need to write it down, and you need to run experiments. You need to enter into this as like really an experimenter and an innovator, not get carried away with your passion, but you need to do it scientifically. So we had all we did is I think we had 2 conversations, and the conclusion I came to was, these are the steps I would follow. I would adopt this mentality of minimum viable product. Yes, there was a book recommendation, go and read this book. And then I suggested, don't spend £1 with me. Don't spend any time with me. If you're serious about this, use either Replit or use Lovable and generate your MVP, right? And he did it. And then I spoke to him probably about 2 weeks ago. And his feedback was, he'd not only gone away and built it in Replit, it was an iPhone and an Android app, okay? He'd got it to trial I think he got up to 40, 60 users using it.
Progressive web app, was it, or native?
So he got it to native, yeah. He can build native. He got it, yeah. So his method of distribution at that time was Android Test Track and Test Flight on iOS. So really impressive. He's an accountant by trade. He's never had any computing degree or anything like this. So he got it to a point for listeners where he can basically, people can install it as a test app on their phones securely through the app stores. And he's secured investment. So he's literally got investment. And it was like oh my God, like, how can I help? This is amazing. Like, if this is a call to just like, I'm really impressed and well done. Kudos to you for following the path, rather than just deluding yourself thinking you've built the next big thing. But what he then unloaded was how limiting all the other stuff is around like Lovable and Replit and vibe coding, and how it can't get into his number, which is about scaling it. I think on day launch, we're talking tens of thousands of users because of the investment and the people that the investors are. So that's
but it says in the marketing material that it can scale to 100,000 users.
So he was really open about all the challenges he'd faced with vibe coding, all the times it messes up, all the times he'd spent battling with it was the word, like just firefighting it, like it breaking stuff, all this sort of stuff. And the conclusion he came to is he'd built an MVP, he'd proven the market demand, he'd secured investment, and now he needed a professional company to take it to the next level. And I said, that's exactly how I view vibe coding, is it's prototyping. Yeah. It's 100% prototyping. And I just was like, that's not me. That's this guy. And I did say to him, Sean, you need to come on the podcast. You need to talk about your journey. You don't have to mention the product or anything, but he's really keen. So he's going to book on, and I'll get him to come on and tell his story, because he also has just got that very realistic view of vibe coding. Like, what an amazing tool it is to be able to not sit with any other human being and just work on, like, how do I want it to work? What do I want it to look like and stuff? So functionality, but then a total realization that this is not going to get you to 10,000 users on launch. It's not going to be able to do half the things. But if you start and you go into a dev company with a prototype, you're light years ahead, absolutely light years ahead, because that development company hasn't got to second guess what you mean.
Absolutely. So I think because we're almost at the end of the podcast, let's just kind of finish off with the hidden costs that nobody talks about, because I think this is where founders get surprised. You kind of alluded to it a very little bit there, but you spend £200 on Replit or Lovable, £20 a month on subscriptions, but they think, Paul, they've built a £50,000 application. They may have got investment, as you just rightly said, that one example you just given, but obviously then that's where, in reality, they'd come to us, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, we took one client who was spending £3,000 a month on Replit, and they now spend under 200 quid.
How come it's £3,000?
Because they're constantly changing their function. Yeah, and the larger the code base becomes, the larger the data set that is changing. So if you imagine,
must be a massive ecosystem, that then.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But it doesn't start off like that, does it? So when they find these tools, what they're doing is, it starts at, I don't know, they say £20 a month, right? Yeah. Well, £20 a month, you haven't built anything.
No.
But you fast forward a year, and you think about somebody who's hooked like a drug on this thing. They're probably 3 projects in. They're chasing the shining. This isn't fair on the client, but they're chasing sometimes this shiny new thing. Like they will literally go for a walk and go, "Oh, I could build that in Replit," and they start another Replit project, all this sort of stuff. Every prompt that you ask of Replit or Lovable is ultimately a token exchange, isn't it? It's working out what you ask. So you suddenly go, "I want to change that." You got spaghetti code across the whole piece. One of the things that we find a lot with audits is how much code exists that's never even in use. So it's just, why have you got this library in there for Python? Oh, it was like version 1. I'm on version 50 now. So it doesn't do any cleanup really. But every interaction, if you say you want to change something across the piece, it's going to cross all the code, making all changes. So it's a combination of the hosting, because he had auto scaling on. So it would scale based on demand, which is the most expensive way of doing it on Replit in terms of his hosting. And then also just, the sheer amount of if you're spending £3,000 a month, right, what does that tell you? He's using it a lot. He's using it a lot. And he comes to us and he's like, I've hit my limit. So the limit for some people will be years down the line, and they'll disagree with everything me and you have said, and they're like, "No, I launched 5-coded stuff, and it's fine and it's safe."
Well, we are getting it now, listeners. We are getting listeners that think they know better than we do, and maybe they do. But as Paul has just said, there will become a time when they come knocking on the door, and we have actually got one now, haven't we, Paul? That has come knocking and has said, "Can I have an audit?" After literally speech for speech, saying, we don't need software developers anymore.
But the irony is, and I won't mention the industry, but you could equally reverse it back to their industry and say, well, we don't need you anymore, because Absolutely. That can do it. So AI is an assistant. It's an assistant. And if you have no knowledge and it's mirroring what you understand, then the assistance it can give you will be an equal par. But if you're an expert in whatever industry you are, your assistant can be an equal senior. So it's almost like you either have a junior assistant or you have a senior assistant, and it goes back to you don't know what you don't know. So the reason he was spending $3,000 a month is he doesn't know that you can export it from Replit, deploy it to a hosting thing for 50 quid. I think he pays £5 a month for his hosting on Railway. And then all we did is we took him to Claude Code and we said, you don't even need to pay for like the max plan. Start on the this lowest tier of Claude, and when you hit your limits, go up. And I think he honestly pays 75 quid a month to Claude. Yeah. So he's paying 100 quid. Let's push it out and say he's spending 200 quid a month. He was spending $3,000. So, but he only got there because he had a conversation with somebody who, and I'm not saying it's just us, I'm saying he had a conversation with somebody who's been in software for decades, who was able to say, well, this is how you would run it in the wild. This is how you would release it. And it's a bit like, you're kind of nursing this thing, you're engineering it, you're caring for it. But the point when you press, go out into the wild and become your own thing, that's a totally different beast. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they kind of said that the fear that they have in the industry, which is another debate, is like, how hard is it to become a junior now? Because the people who are sought after are the seniors with the experience, so that they can work with AI, get the speed, get the quality, and they also know how to ask it questions. Because we've been there when servers fail. We've been there when we've had sleepless nights and bugs have crashed systems manually. If you're trying to get into software development now, because the AI use is so explicit across the whole thing, or like it's all consuming, you're not learning. Like you are learning, but you're learning a very different ecosystem to the kind of guys who have been doing it for decades. Like Tim Winstanley said when he was on, and I think there's suddenly a resurgence in companies are hiring now seniors like they're getting out of fashion. Because they know if you put a senior with AI, you get a phenomenal amount of output that you would have took a team before.
And that is absolutely right, isn't it? Because what one senior person could do with his co-worker agents now is phenomenal. So if you built something with AI and you're wondering whether it is safe to put it in front of real users, that's exactly the question a Code Audit answers, and what Paul and I have been talking about today. So do not guess, get it checked. If you want to, contact us. A small investment is in understanding the risks today can save a huge amount of pain tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think the thing to take away is that as well, like the things that this audit uncovers, you can use AI to fix.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't have to then, it's just awareness, isn't it? So you can, we've both spent a lot of time, haven't we, Sean, reviewing these types of applications, and we see the same patterns and the same fixes, and it's far more manageable than people expect. That's the big takeaway.
Absolutely right. So if it's you, or you know someone that has produced a prototype and they've sat on it and they're nervous about it, get in touch. We're doing more of these than ever, and we're happy to talk it through. Sometimes all it takes is an independent review, as Paul said, going down the pub. You might not go down the pub with you, but it can certainly give you the confidence in your next step.
Yeah, so that's it for today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening. Cheers, Sean. Yeah. That was a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. So take care, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Control-Alt-DEV.